The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Hello, I'm Ray Lemura, and thank you for watching this edition of Cable Reports from the General Assembly. Our guest today is Senator Dick Saslaw. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Ray. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. Senator, tell us a little bit about your district.
Well, it's mostly inside the Beltway. It's virtually all residential, either single-family townhouses or condos, and there are some apartments. There are office buildings, and they're pretty randomly scattered, and there's no single companies in these buildings. There may be one or two, but by and large, there's no large contractor. The buildings are filled with attorneys and doctors and people like that. Right. I don't have Tyson's Corner, and like I said, most of my district is inside the Beltway. I have some precincts outside in the Merrifield area and in the Springfield area. Okay.
With a district like that, I would think that education is a major focus of your constituents.
When we've polled, that's the #1 issue. And then transportation, as it is with every district in Northern Virginia. But education is big with my constituents.
All right. And you have a fascinating high school up in your community as well.
In my district, and it's by sheer happenstance, is the Science High School, which U.S. News and World Report in their rankings of the top 100 high schools in America, which they started doing 4 years ago. The #1 school every year has been Thomas Jefferson. And it draws from Arlington, Fairfax. About 80% of the students are from Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, Fauquier County, and the cities of Manassas Park, Fairfax City. Right. So you've got about 5,000 people the first Saturday of every December taking a test for 450 slots. And so you got a good product in, you get a good product out. And about a quarter of the kids, the graduating class, goes to UVA, and a little more than a third, or almost, well, not quite a third, about a fifth of the class goes to the Ivy League schools, and then there's an enormous amount that go to schools like MIT, Caltech, Stanford. In fact, the last couple of years in a row, they've had 25 or more enroll at MIT. A lot more were accepted, but 25 in each of the classes have enrolled in MIT.
All right. So, I mean, I can see that you've been a great supporter of that school, and I think a lot of other areas in the state would like to replicate something like that.
Well, Senator Norman and I put money in the budget for Tidewater and essentially the Lynchburg, Roanoke area, to take a look at taking their governor schools that they have there and expanding them into a full-time, 4-year school similar to Thomas Jefferson. One of the things you have to remember is it cost a lot to operate the school. Excuse me. The business community up there is very supportive. The PTA raises between $500,000 and $700,000 a year,
wow, just
for equipment purchases, maintenance, upkeep, things like that. But the work that's done at that school is unbelievable. I mean, in one of the labs, the kids have put together. They developed a wheelchair that operates on brain waves.
Oh my gosh. That's fascinating.
And there's DNA, there's cellular research, there's
at the high school?
At the high school level, and the papers they've done are at a master's level at most colleges.
Wow, that's fascinating. So able to replicate that around the state would be...
Well, it would be good. I mean, it's been 22 years, and no other area has stepped up to duplicate that. They've got some part-time type high schools. But, Fairfax County's got arguably the best public school system in America. And the people, the community has really been very, very supportive.
Right. Well, Senator, you talked about the business community and being supportive of the efforts up there. You have been a tireless advocate for the business community here, knowing it's an engine Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing on the
Well,
business side.
you know, if you don't have a healthy business climate, you're in trouble. It's hard enough for businesses these days, much less have them operate in an area that's got a pretty bothersome environment. We're relatively free of regulations in this state. I mean, you know, we're very concerned about health and safety, things like that. But reporting procedures and things like that, we try to, you know, keep it to a minimum as to what businesses have to do to operate here. And the last, 5 or 6 governors have done an awful lot in trying to, recruit and maintain businesses here. One of the things that's important if you're going to do this is higher education. One of the reasons that a lot of these companies move to Northern Virginia, aside from proximity to the nation's capital, is that you're within an hour of about five major universities. You've got George Mason, which is in Virginia. You've got Georgetown University. You've got George Washington. You have the University of Maryland, and you have the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. Well, I mean, if you're a technology company, I mean, they have everything that you could possibly ask for.
Right, exactly. So tell us a little bit about some of the legislation that you have introduced this year.
Well, one is a bill that plugs a loophole in the Petroleum Marketing Practices Act that I first established, or filed 30-some years ago, which prevented major oil companies from opening up a company operation next to their own retail dealer. And the reason is they would retail it on the street cheaper than they would wholesale it to their own dealer, which made it unfair. Well, I've applied it to jobbers. Falls Church, they're moving their elections to November from May. I've had a couple bills rolled into other bills. The healthcare exchange bill, which, depending on how the Supreme Court goes on the hearing of the Affordable Health Care Act, you have to set up, and I folded that into Senator Watkins' bill. I'm not sure they're going to move on that this year. They're going to wait and see what happens, at the court. We've got, a problem in this country with health care. Make no mistake about it. And I don't know, and nor does it seem, does anybody else know exactly what the right solution is. You talk to the doctors, they tell you it's not working. You talk to the hospital administrators, they tell you it's not working. You talk to the insurance companies, they tell you it's not working. What's interesting is around the globe, with modifications, virtually every country now on the planet, with the exception of Cuba, has adopted, with modifications, our economic system in this country. Mm-hmm. But there's not been another country on this planet that's adopted our healthcare model, not a one. The last two I was told that looked at ours was South Korea and Taiwan, and they opted for apparently a hybrid system between what the Germans and French have. So, I mean, again, I don't know what the solution is, because healthcare costs keep going up every year. Your association probably knows that just as well as anybody else, and we've got to find some way to stem that. And I don't know how you do that without requiring everybody into the pool. And the reason I say that is that if you didn't require people to buy automobile insurance until they had a wreck, and then the insurance company had to pick up and pay for it, I mean, you'd have chaos. Right. And what holds down insurance rates is that when you get your driver's license or have a car, you have to purchase insurance, and that holds down the cost of automobile insurance. A lot of young people just simply choose to go to the hospital emergency rooms and not pay. Well, that's expensive care, and it shows up in our bills the next year, right, and contributes significantly to the rise in healthcare costs.
Exactly. Now, Senator, you serve on some of the leading committees in the Senate. Your tenure has given you a lot of opportunity to touch so many of the important issues that we're debating, healthcare being one of them. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the committees that you serve on?
Well, I serve on finance. I'm the second-ranking Democrat on that, or third, behind Senator Colgan and Senator Howe. I'm the ranking Democrat on education and health, the second-ranking one on commerce and labor, and the ranking one on courts of justice. And they're significant committees in that they get really, I think, the most important legislation. And I've been able, to prevent, until this year, a whole lot of bad things from happening. I've tried to make some good things happen too. But this year has been significantly different. Now, some of these bills have gotten out of committee have run into trouble on the floor. And, I think that had we organized the committees a little more evenly, a little more fairly, we wouldn't have, Virginia would not have become the laughing stock of America as a result of some of these bills. I mean, I can tell you from 98 to 2008, we didn't appear on any late night shows. Now, all of a sudden, the state's being talked about on Bill Maher, on Saturday Night Live, on the Jon Stewart Daily Show, CBS Evening News, MSNBC. I mean, it never stops. And there was a letter emailed to the governor and copied to all 140 legislatures from the business community, signed by 20 of the biggest hitters at Tyson's Corner, essentially telling the governor and the Republicans to lay off the social issues that are damaging the reputation of this state.
All right. And that's something that you've worked hard on, is the reputation of the business reputation of the state.
It's important. It really is. Right. I mean, we've got a very favorable environment here. I don't know. I mean, they all come here. They could go to Montgomery County, Maryland. They don't. They come here, like I said, for a variety of reasons. We're, like I said, we've got a very healthy climate for you to operate a business in.
Right. You talked a little bit about bipartisan relationships, and I think you're known for your bipartisanship. Why don't you talk about how important that is?
Well, it's very important in making things work, and particularly when it's 2020. You got a different situation in the House where it's 68-32, but here it's not. And it's, the failure to recognize that has created a lot of problems, as you can see, reading the newspapers.
All right. How has that process been working? And I know it's very contentious on a number of issues.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen these social bills, which have gotten us in a lot of trouble. When you get people who aren't physicians putting in bills that should only be handled by physicians, this is the problem you run into. And, the ultrasound bill and the Senate version was dumped on Senator Vogel at the very last minute. And quite frankly, it took a lot of courage for her to, strike the bill when she found out the ramifications of it. She shouldn't have been put in that spot, and the bill should have never gotten out of committee to begin with.
All right. So I know...
and then we've had to deal with personhood.
Right.
I had to laugh when Seth Meyers on Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live says, after personhood, what's next? He says, life begins at last call, or when you hit the send button at match.com.
You're on the Commerce and Labor Committee also. Right. Tell us about some of the issues that are rolling through Commerce and Labor.
Well, aside from a bill affecting your industry, we have the bills deal. Commerce and Labor deals with utilities. It deals with the insurance industry and commerce in general. Yesterday we had a bill that essentially let me back up. We tried to deregulate the utilities. It didn't work. Dominion's rates were so low, no one was able to come in and compete. So we re-regulated. And during that deregulation and going back to re-regulation, always one of the major issues you deal with is stranded cost. You tell Dominion or you tell Appalachian or the co-ops, you got to have X amount of generation in order to take care of the people in your district. Now along comes somebody else who says, well, we want part of this too, but we're not willing to pay for stranded costs. We're not willing to, be regulated by the SEC. We just want to, go in there and skim the cream, which is essentially what this company, the solar company, wanted to do. So the bill got carried over till next year. Nothing's ever as easy as it seems. Now, that doesn't stop an individual homeowner from going out and buying solar equipment and operating it themselves, but for some company to enter into numerous power purchase agreements, kind of vitiates, the work that went into when we re-regulated. And Senator Norman and, the rest of Commerce and Labor put in a lot of work to go back to that.
Right. The budget. Tell us a little bit about the subcommittee that you're on in the finance area, and then tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm on education subcommittee of the finance committee and transportation. The governor, as you know, wanted to take general fund money and use it for transportation when you, quite frankly, need to raise the gas tax. We have one of the lowest gas taxes in America. The rest of the states around us are anywhere from 25% higher than we are to 100% higher than we are with respect to gas taxes. And although their prices don't necessarily reflect that, they're a lot closer to ours. But we have not raised the gas tax since 1986. Now, Senator Wagner has a bill indexing it, the existing tax. But even after 15 years, we won't even be where the average state is today. And we need to do something about that. And the answer is not to take it out of public schools, higher education, health and human services, and public safety, which is what the governor wanted to do. And we just said there could not possibly be, none of the people in our party were going to vote for that. And that's one of the things that's happened, is that we failed to come to grips with the reality that we can't finance this state. When I got here, we were 35–40% of, for instance, University of Virginia's financing. It's down to like 7% now. We can't continue to do that and then tell the colleges, don't raise the tuition. They don't have any choice. Right. If they want to keep the doors open, they've got to raise the tuition. A couple of years ago, VCU raised their tuition 25%. I didn't get one email, I didn't get one letter of protest from any of the people going there, because they knew that if that didn't happen, they were going to have to cut an awful lot of courses, and the students would go an extra semester to graduate. Well, the cost of that extra semester is a lot higher than the tuition, right, going up. Right. So, plus loss of income, not being out in the work world. So, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, we were a rural state with a rural tax structure, and it worked. The problem is we're an urban, state now with the same tax structure, and it's not working. And to give you an example, one that I just gave you with respect to, the college tuition, is demand for higher education is enormous. I remember listening to Mills Godwin, who was governor from 66 to 70 and from 74 to 78. And Godwin remarked that before he started the community college system, and we had no sales tax then, he initiated the sales tax in Virginia at 4% to pay for the community college system. And we gave a share of that to local governments for their own public school system and operation. But only 39% of the high school graduates went to college. It's up in the high 70s now. Right. And that demand is what's driving this. Then, you've had the advent of, Medicaid, which started in the late 60s. It was, for the first biennium, it was like $22 million. Now it's like for the biennium, it's like $6 or $7 billion, and with the federal government paying half and us paying half. I mean, it's just, you know, things have changed.
Right.
And you've got more and more demands for a pie that's never been increased. So therein lies the problem.
Right.
And we're not funding public schools until Mark Warner raised the sales tax from 4.5% to 5%. We were 48th in what states gave local school systems. I told people I used to go to bed at night and say, thank God for Alabama and Mississippi, or we'd have been dead last. You know, you're winding up with two Virginians. You're winding up with Northern Virginia and then what everybody calls ROVA, the rest of Virginia. I talked to some of the Southwest senators. If you take the Senate districts of all the municipalities that exist in the 7 districts of Senator Newman, Senator Edwards, Senator Carrico, Senator Puckett, Senator Stanley, Senator Smith, Senator Ruff, and you raise the real estate tax in each one of those municipalities 1 penny, you generate around $7.5 million. You raise it 1 penny in Fairfax, you generate $20 million in one municipality. So as we've reduced what we've given public ed, Fairfax county's had no problem, you know, making up the slack. The other localities don't have the wherewithal to do that. So as a result, I was told that 50% of the University of Virginia's offers, go to Fairfax County, wow, which is 14% of the graduates. So you got 14% of the high school graduates getting 50% of the offers at UVA.
That's incredible. And with the rest of the budget that's being worked on, you have been a conferee for years. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's where you know, if and when we get around to you know, having a budget and then having a conference, a lot of the work is done by the staff. I mean, everybody knows what the parameters are. You know what the give and take is. There are certain things that each house is going to insist on, and it usually works out. The system, it's a good system, and it usually works out. I mean, occasionally we have to go an extra day or extra 2 days, but when you figure that we've got 8 million, a state of 8 million, there are states that have 3, 4, and 5 million that take 5 and 6 months to do what we do in 2 months, or in a short session, 46 days. So last year it took us 47 days, you know, big deal, you know, 1 extra day.
Right.
But, you know, you're running a state with a part-time legislature, and it's a pretty big state at that. I mean, we have more people than Massachusetts, and they have a full-time legislature. We don't.
Right.
And quite frankly, that's a good thing. You don't need a full-time legislature here.
All right. So, talking a little bit about the conferee process, does the Senate pretty much lock arms together?
Yeah, I mean, when we go into the budget conference, we're usually totally united.
Right.
I mean, we pretty much try to do everything we can to protect our own territory.
Right. Any unique stories you ever had as a conferee?
Well, a lot of it, a lot of the stories occurred before I even got on finance. When, you know, the old days when Ed Willey and Hunter Andrews ran this thing. I mean, there was a period of time where you never knew where the conferees were because they'd go out of town and be holed up in a hotel somewhere in Virginia, which the press had no idea.
Right.
And you know, they'd come back and announce, you know, there was nothing open. I mean, they come back and announce they had a deal, and for all I know, maybe they had a deal even before they left.
Right.
But that's where this whole thing worked.
Right.
And now you don't have that. It's all pretty much in the open.
Right.
Now, do discussions go on privately? Yes, they do.
Right. What has been the major thrust of some of the Democratic issues that you all have been advocating this session?
Well, the restoring the money to public schools. You know, the governor says, well, I put a lot of money in there. What he did was he counted the contribution to VRS, which we should have been doing for the last 20 years. In the last 20 years, we've only made the required contribution, the full amount 4 times. And had we done what, the people that run that system told us we needed to put into it, you and I wouldn't even be having this conversation about this right now. And he was taking, money away from that. He took the composite index away from Northern Virginia, not the composite index, excuse me, the cost to compete, which, expands out pretty far from Northern Virginia. And the cost to compete is added money simply because of the cost of living and what we have to do to compete with teachers, in the other jurisdictions across the river, in Maryland and in D.C.
All right.
And that's one of the problems, he brought up that's one of the problems that we have in this state is the disparity in pay for teachers. You teach 30-some years in some of these municipalities and you top out at $50,000 or in the 40s in some. In Fairfax County, you teach 30 years, or in Arlington, and you're in 90. I think I got classroom teachers earning $90,000. And you can attract some pretty good talent when you're willing to pay.
Right, right. So, have there been any other issues the Democratic caucus has been looking to?
Well, the education issue,
right. Health
and human services is important, and we restored, a lot of stuff.
Right.
There's still a long way to go, and we would like to see, the settlement that the foreclosure industry all across the country brought us $69 million, and the $65 million, 4 of it has been used. The Attorney General took his finder's fee,
right.
But $65 million is still there, and that money, $60 million of it, should probably go to the Housing Trust Fund.
Right.
To help people who have had some problems.
Sure, sure. We have a couple minutes left.
Sure.
Is there any additional issues that you're trying to focus the party towards as we get closer towards? Well,
it's not so much focus the party towards as try to focus the governor towards, and that we need to straighten out a lot of things over in the Senate, and he needs to have a conversation with the other side on revisiting the organization. Aside from the fact that they totally ignored the fact that it was 2020, what they did has brought nothing but ridicule to the state over the bills that used to get killed routinely,
right.
or not even put in because they knew they were going to get killed, have now turned us into the laughing stock of America.
All right. Well, it's put you all, I'd say, a lot of the Democrats in a position of having to really stand up and fight for those issues.
Well, that's correct.
So we have just about a minute or so left. You have an outstanding staff. Tell us a little bit about your staff.
Janet Muldoon has been with me since '98, and if there's a better legislative aide in America, I don't know who it is. I mean, she's just superb. There's nothing that she can't do,
right.
And she's always ahead of the curve.
Right.
And that's so important.
Right.
That when you have somebody who's always looking ahead,
right.
And she keeps me from going off the deep end.
Right. Well, Senator Saslaw, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
I bet. Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Right. And thank you for watching this edition of Cable Reports from the General Assembly. I'm Ray Lemura.
Mm-hmm.